Okay, welcome back, folks. So again, today we are all about trying to one, acquaint ourselves with new people on our team, our collective team of helping Vermonters. And so we have a brand new team at DCF for which we are grateful to have leadership and appreciate you all being here. And I'm not sure how we've had, quite a bit of time with Janet already. And so we certainly welcome her presence here, but would love to focus on the commissioner and the director of race, gender equity and accessibility. That's a long title, isn't it? So welcome to both of you. And feel free to, I'm not sure who wants to take the witness chair first, or if you want to come together, or how are you this is an introduction to the committee, so this is just really going to be a discussion and dialogue. So
sure, I'll go up first maybe, and
okay.
Cede the chair to Rachel.
Okay, that sounds great. And we'll do a quick round of introductions. So welcome again.
Thank you.
My name is Teresa Wood. I'm from Waterbury, and I also represent Bolton, Fuel Score, and Huntington.
Hi there, I'm Jessica Brumstead, and I represent Shelburne and St. George.
Hi, Ray Garofano. I'm from Essex, and I also represent Essex Junction.
Hi, Dane Whitman from Bennington.
Hi, Bill Hyman from South Burlington and Williston.
Great.
Jubilee McGill, Bridport, Middlebury, New Haven, and Weybridge.
James Gregoire, Fairfield, Fletcher, and Bakersfield.
Good morning, Dan Noyes from Woolkit, Hyde Park, Johnson, and Belvedere.
And Donahue, Northfield, and Berlin.
My representative.
There you go. And then we'll go right around the outside of the room.
Hello, I'm Rachel Edens. I'm the new director of Race, Gender, Equity, and Accessibility at DCF.
Hi again, Janet McLaughlin, Deputy Commissioner of the Department of Children and Families for the Child Development Division. Me as well.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm an intern with Representative Gary.
Welcome back.
David Cunin, I'm with Cranston Group.
Drake Turner with Let's Grow Cats.
Matthew DeGrove with Action Circles.
And I'm Lori, Committee Assistant.
Great. Well, thank you all for being here. We appreciate you being here. And Commissioner Winters, just if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself for the record. And then, honestly, this is just a dialogue. We wanted to get a chance to sort of meet you informally before we had an opportunity to have you here testifying on any variety of things that your department handles. So the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much. For the record, my name is Chris Winters, the freshly minted commissioner of the Department for Children and Families, and it's really a pleasure to be here before this committee this morning. A lot of familiar faces around the room. I had the honor and the privilege of being able to swear you in as a Deputy Secretary of State, my last gig. I know many of you around the table, but I've spent most of my time in the legislature across the hall, or maybe what used to be across the hall yeah. in government operations as the Director of Professional Regulation for a number of years, and then the last 8 years as Deputy Secretary of State. And I'm really excited to work with you all here and the incredible amount of experience that's around this table. This, to me, looks like one of the strongest committees in the building, and I don't say that to every committee.
No, yeah. That's all right. We are in a competition, so.
But I think, there are just so many of you around the table that I think probably could have been chairs or vice chairs in other committees, but it seems to me that you stayed here because of the work, and this is a really amazing group to be able to work with. And I really don't say that to every committee, but then I'll also say that you're the first committee I've talked to.
Yeah. So we do appreciate a sense of humor as well. It is like, it's serious work, and being able to laugh every once in a while is a good thing.
You really have to have it, as I'm also finding as the new commissioner. I'm on day 8. My new job. But that really ties in perfectly to why I'm at DCF now. It's the mission, it's the talented and dedicated people who work there, and it's the ability to make a difference for Vermont, which is, I think, why a lot of you are around this table as well. You may have heard, I ran for Secretary of State last year so that I could keep on serving and making a difference. I really loved the job at the Secretary of State's office. We had a dedicated, hardworking team. I was working for a secretary who shared my values and my vision for how state government ought to operate and how it reflects our collective values to solve common problems that we can't solve alone. And I really enjoyed in the Secretary of State's office kind of breaking down barriers and systems, making government more accessible to people, whether that was in voting or business registration or professional regulation, obtaining a license, registering your business. Those things ought to be as easy as possible while we meet the obligations that we have in statute. And really through my years as in the Secretary of State's office, I became a firm believer in accountability through transparency. So I think state government ought to be transparent, that we need to knock down the silos between agencies to make it make it easier for the public to access us as a state government. We need to work together, and we need to be more efficient with taxpayer dollars through either changes in technology or revising our processes to make them more streamlined. And, I really worked hard every day to try to build Vermonters' faith and trust in government. So when I approach my work every day, I like to think that there are 600,000 plus Vermonters looking over my shoulder.
Commissioner?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt just for a moment? Representative Paola, is it noisy in the hallway?
There's a lot of people in the hallway.
I think that they're wanting to hear this testimony.
Okay.
At least some of them are.
Want the door open?
If it's not going to be problematic, I might ask you to close it if it does. I know that there are, there's a fair number of people who are interested in what you have to say, Commissioner.
There's also Zoom.
Just so everybody knows, the chair is wanting to leave the door open so people can hear what's happening in the committee room. Just ask you to keep your conversation down a little bit so that. Great.
Thank you.
Should I try to speak up so that they can hear?
Speak in your normal tone of voice. It just is. We had a lot of people peering inside the door, and as you can imagine, there's been a great deal of consternation about the department, and people are very excited for new leadership. So they're excited to hear what you have to say. So just wanted everybody to be able to access that information.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So when I did run for Secretary of State and that, fell short, I started looking around for ways that I could continue to make a difference and bring my skill set somewhere else. I was looking nationally at elections issues, but I was also looking in Vermont and state government. And I think DCF commissioner is one of, I keep being told this and I'm quickly finding out, one of the most difficult but most impactful and worthwhile positions in state government. I received a lot of encouragement to apply for the position. I also heard from a lot of close friends saying, please steer clear from this. Saying it was too big, it's too controversial, too emotionally taxing, too many systemic issues and unsolvable problems were the things that I was hearing. So that really got me interested. I started digging deeper and talking to people who I knew who worked within DCF, former commissioners, other secretaries in other agencies in state government. Then I interviewed with the leadership team there at DCF, including the secretary and the deputy secretary, and interviewed with the governor. And these meetings really clinched it for me, convinced me this was the right fit for me and the next step for me. I'm at heart driven to serve Vermont and to solve problems. And I saw a whole lot of dedicated and talented people aligned doing really important work. And I'm grateful that they chose me and that I've been given this opportunity. And to be, perfectly honest, on my 8th day as commissioner, my vision for the department and my priorities are still a work in progress. There's so much to learn. I'm doing a lot of listening and learning. It's been a fire hose of information. And as part of that learning, I'm really looking forward to speaking with each of you to understand the issues at DCF, the experiences you've had, and your priorities. And I can tell you, I'm trying to get up to speed as quickly as possible. And I'm getting indoctrination by fire on some issues that I know they're all important to you, but the four big ones that I'm diving into first are the high-end system of care, housing, childcare, and grants and contracts at the department. And I don't need to tell all of you this, but DCF is a huge department with 6 different divisions doing a variety of critical work that affects all of our lives in some way. And stepping in from the outside is overwhelming, but it's also invigorating. And I am really enjoying the work so far. We're responding to difficult issues and emerging crises every single day in this department. It's a barrage of email, like I said, a fire hose of information and quick decision making that has to happen every single day there. And it's going to take some time for me to fully understand the issues, the systems, the culture of the organization, and identify the strengths and weaknesses there and the opportunities for change. I'm almost done. So
That's okay. No, we appreciate it.
So, with that said, I want to bring my experience to the table and my values around transparency, around trust, empathy, humility, because I don't know everything, and certainly we all don't know everything at DCF. Communication, collaboration, and efficiency of systems. And I think it's critically important that we pay close attention to the dedicated staff there who have been through a lot in the last 3 years, so that we have a positive culture there, so that we have good morale at DCF. People want to work there, and we can recruit and retain the kind of excellent people who are already working there at DCF. I plan to build on our successes and look for what areas of improvement that there might be. I want to make sure that we continue with a culture of empathy and respect toward the people that we serve, toward each other in DCF, and that we maintain strong relationships with all of our community partners. I've learned quickly that our work is not possible without the hundreds of community partners and organizations that work with DCF. And our work is only going to be as good as our cooperation and collaboration with those partners. I'm excited for a few months down the road to really start to evaluate our systems and look for areas of improvement there, make us more efficient, make our services more accessible so that our teams can be at their absolute best. And one last thing I'd like to mention is that I've heard many times already in just my first 8 days there, that we need to get out of crisis mode and get back to more thoughtful, strategic approaches, start getting upstream with some of the people that we serve, and do as much as we can before they get to crisis mode. I love this kind of proactive thinking, and I'm really looking forward to facilitating those conversations, that work within the department to get it moving in that direction. And last of all, I want to thank all of you for the work that you've done to support DCF and empower us to be successful. I'm really looking forward to working with you all on that partnership. And I want you to know that any of you can reach out to me at any time. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I'm really excited for new leadership on the leadership team at DCF with Rachel and with Janet. They've got a couple of days seniority on me. So I'm sure they can tell you everything you want to know. So I'm happy to have Rachel join me or give her the seat.
Why don't we just have an opportunity to maybe ask a couple of questions or make a couple of comments, and because your remarks were so thoughtful. Really, it would be lovely if you wouldn't mind sending those to our committee assistants so that we can post them, and other people in the building who have had concerns about the department and the services and supports and the people that are served by the department and the employees who work there, I think would appreciate hearing or being able to read your comments. So if
I'll do that.
Okay, appreciate that very much. So I just want to, not to barrage the new commissioner with questions, but just to give folks an opportunity to ask a couple of questions before we move on to the next witness. So Representative Gregoire.
I don't have a question, I have a comment. It's nice to hear your statement and also paying attention to tone and stuff. You can tell when people believe stuff, and I think you do. And so as a department that rightfully or wrongly gets a lot of complaints, Some is probably warranted and others is probably just communication where people are it's a very stressful environment for anybody to be involved in DCS, right? It's nice to hear your approach, especially of getting out of crisis mode and communication and transparency, because the less people know and the less communication there is, especially in a stressful situation, the more likely really negative thoughts spin and it just cycles the whole process down. So I really like whatever.
I agree. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Chris. I just really want to compliment you on the priorities that you've set already. I think lots of people will be really excited to hear that those are the priorities where those need a lot of attention and have needed a lot of attention. So I'm just thrilled to hear that.
Thank you.
And I guess I have to speak from the depth and breadth of the organization as well. And, some of the key things that you highlighted as things that need sort of immediate attention are obviously things that we are deeply concerned about. You'll be spending a lot of time in our committee or working with us, and we appreciate your openness to doing that and particularly I'm thinking about housing and some of our work ahead of us on housing and how that needs to be collaborative. And, we're looking for a new day on emergency support for people who lack homes right now and or in the future as well. So appreciate that and appreciate the level of detail of, thinking about grants and contracts. I can tell you, we have heard, a lot about the grants and contracting process at DCF. And so that level of detail as well. And obviously, we have a big child care bill floating around the building, and it will be landing here in the not too distant future. And we will be working closely with you and with Janet and her division on that as well. Great. So anybody else have any other comments or? Great. Thank you so much for being here, Commissioner, and appreciate it so much. And we are very happy to have your colleagues. And I don't know if you want to, you can sit there together or you can sit there separately. It doesn't really matter to us.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
We were excited to hear from Representative Garofano about the hiring of your position, and appreciate you being here to share a little bit about your background and what you hope to do in this position. And thank you so much for being here. The floor is all yours.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me this morning. I want to echo what Chris just said, and I'm sure the sentiments that Janet expressed earlier, that we're really excited as new members of the leadership team at DCF to be embraced and to be heard this morning so early on the job. From my wizened sage viewpoint of 14 whole days. I know it all. So anything that Chris left out, but I'm and cover any of those gaps. Seriously, though, I will start by saying humbly that there is no way to cover all of the gaps in the knowledge between what I know and what I hope to learn from the team at DCF. It's a group of incredibly talented and dedicated professionals. And so given that, I think that that's an excellent department to start with a position like this. Having an inaugural equity position, and this is my second one in the last 24 months that are building new programs, and I'll talk about my last experience a little bit, but knowing that the work that I do and that I hope to do is really embedding work and support work. And so my goal for DCF and for all of the work that we do is that we look at equity not as an add-on, but as a lens and a screen through which we do everything, through which we look at all of our policies, processes, and procedures. And we look at everything that we do through, not alongside, not on top of, not, because can I tiptoe around it without equity seeing me? So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that to inform our work the same way that we think about fiscal responsibility. We want to think about equity responsibility as well. And so given that, there is so much for me to learn about the ways that the 6 divisions at DCF are going to do this work specifically. So I've been an equity professional for almost 15 years in a variety of different ways. I spent the majority of my career in higher education. My most recent higher ed job was at Dartmouth College. So I spent that time as the assistant dean and advisor to first generation and low income students, also an inaugural position. This is a theme. This is what I do. But at the same time, I was also holding a dual position. I was the assistant dean and advisor to Black students, so I was there as well. And so holding both of those positions, I'm not a native Vermonter. I am not a native New Englander. I'm originally from North Carolina, from a very, very small and rural place in the eastern part of the state. But I've been here for about, a composite 9 years, and there's a story there. But being able to think about, what this area looks like to our students that were coming in, gave me a lot of perspective on, what I could possibly do to be able to help, like all people that wanted to come into Vermont. So not only the individuals that have been here for years or generations, but if today is your first day and you just drove across the border, it is my job as a resident, as a neighbor, and also now as a professional to help make that transition for you smooth, to make your day-to-day smooth, to do everything that I can in my power. And I believe that this is our charge as servant and steward leaders, to make sure that we are doing the very best that we can to help every Vermonter thrive. So that's what I'm looking to do in this job. So after moving out of the higher ed space, I took some time off to be a full-time doc student at UMass Boston. My study is in higher education, particularly critical disability studies and chronic illnesses in Black and Brown women and femmes. And so with that work, I've been very interested in the ways that we look at disability and that we look at ability and big D's and little D's and what those things mean as far as identity is concerned. And so being able to come to a role like this one that specifically names that accessibility in all of its many facets is a part of this that's intentionally called out was really exciting to me. So as I said, this is my second role doing this work in the past 2 years. So as I said, I'm from North Carolina. My mother still lives there. I left in November of 2021 to go to Asheville, Buncombe County, to be the inaugural Chief Equity and Human Rights Officer in the state. There in that county, and that was an incredible experience. And not only did I get a huge crash course on what county government looked like, I also had the opportunity to work as the project manager for our reparations commission. So knowing that that was something that I'm just going to be candid, it's the South, and I felt that if it could happen in Asheville, it could happen potentially anywhere, but that was the best chance and the best shot that we had. And it's also my home. And so I wanted to go back. I wanted to take that opportunity. And so I applied for the job and I was invited to come and work with them. However, as I said, it's a composite 9 years. My husband is a high school teacher at Springfield High School. He teaches art and PE. And in my deciding that I wanted to have this experience of going back home to do this work that I'm passionate about, particularly around reparative and restorative justice in the South, it meant that I had to make the decision to leave my home, my support network, and my husband here and go do that work. So I did that for a year, and we toyed with the idea of relocating permanently to North Carolina. And this is something that I want to be very clear about as an equity professional, and particularly as an equity professional in 2023. I think that one of the challenges that we have in doing this work is burnout and lack of care. And that is something that as a leader, I want to model as well. So I will be honest in saying that North Carolina right now for me was just not the moment of ease that I needed to be able to do this work, that I need to have a surrounding, and I need to have a support network, and I need to have the systems that I need in order to do my work well. And so I had to make a very difficult decision that I was going to leave North Carolina and come back to Vermont. And so this time I'm coming back with a greater pragmatism than I had before. While in Vermont, in addition to working at Dartmouth, I also served on the select board in Hartford. And so that was also an experience that interfaced with our local government system here, and one where I learned a lot. That was a time in the state when Black women particularly were having, this is the most watered down euphemistic thing I can say, a very difficult time in positions of leadership around the state, and where women and femmes were really feeling unheard and feeling attacked, and not only feeling those things, but being unheard and being attacked and being discounted and being pushed out of those spaces where their voices could be heard on behalf of others here in the state. And so I stepped into that role during that time. And I think that was a really interesting experience that now informs what I'm doing now. So coming to DCF, knowing that this is a new position, the thing that for me separates this or sets this apart from the job I was doing in Asheville is that, my work in Asheville was very broad, and that was something that was difficult to me. I wanted to be able to drill down. And so coming to DCF and working with human services, that is my wheelhouse. That's where I really wanted to dig in. And so having this opportunity is an opportunity for me to be able to do the work more deeply in a way that is more specific to the work that we are doing at DCF, and in turn, what Vermonters actually need. So I want to say that despite my very long title with many positives, that it is true, and it is my personal philosophy, that equity is not a euphemism for race. I'm going to say it again. Equity is not a euphemism for race. Despite the fact that we are leading with race, and I personally believe that that is the most important, that we need to move forward with that equity means all assets, all factors, all identities that individuals hold, and the intersections of those and the intersections of those oppressions. And so even though race, gender, and accessibility are the ones that are called out, I think that, knowing that for me, my work also includes everything from ageism to gender expression to national identity to, and this is a Vermont specific one, so it's an asterisk to Vermont citizenship and what it means to be a new person coming into this state. And so that is something that I really want to make clear. It's unique and interesting that this position serves DCF specifically, but I think that what we have the opportunity to do, and what I hope to be able to further, is to create a position that serves as a model for our other departments that can be replicated. And so those are my hopes. I'll close by saying that, yes, it's been 14 days for me, but looking at 100 days, like where does that get me? And 100 days gets me right between the 3rd anniversary of the murder of George Floyd and Juneteenth. So June 16th, everybody can, that peanut butter cake, wherever it was, like you can just remember me. That's going to be my 100 days. But that day is really important to me. What do I want to have? What foundation do I want to have begin to have set at that point? And I think that for us, there is behind the scenes work, and then there's the more in front of the scenes kind of action oriented work that we look at. And so knowing that we're at a point now where for the past 36 months at least, many people have been taking the time and the hard work to do this work of interrogating our experiences, what we think of as our realities, and becoming better neighbors to one another. And on the other side, celebrating the freedom of African Americans and descendants of West Africans in this country, that is a time that I want to see us in DCF particularly move to a spot where we're looking at action, where we're looking at how to, I started saying about that lens, how that lens actually plays out. What does that mean for us? What are the goals that we set? How do we measure those things? What are the indicators? I think that equity work sometimes people see as a little touchy-feely, a little soft science, but, and I believe that too, English major that I was. But I also believe that being data-driven is important in this work, and that making sure that we are doing that in order to be the best stewards we can of resources and time and money and so on is important. And so to be able to continue to gain traction, my first few months, I hope to do some work around deciding what is the data that we need? Do we have it? And where should it inform us? And how do we continue to gather it and continue to move forward? So that's a little bit about me. And again, thank you so much for having me. And I'm delighted to come back at any time.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think that we are fortunate that you made this career choice and this decision to move back to Vermont, although I'm sure your mother is probably not too happy about it.
I'm an only child. She's feeling the feels right now. And thank you for coming here. And thank you to DCF for leading the way on thinking about a position such as this in an individual department within state government. And, I think we have a long ways to go in terms of making state government and the supports and services that we provide to reflect all of the values that you just spoke of. And I can tell you that in this committee, we're delighted to hear you speak about all forms of equity. And I saw Dan's, Representative Noyes' face light up when you talked about ageism, and certainly I did as well when you talked about disability. And there are many forms of equity and inclusiveness that we need to be aware of, including that of gender and race and a whole host of things. So I love that you have a broad perspective on what that can mean in your role in state government. And open it up for questions for members of the committee. Anybody have any questions or comments that they'd like to share?
I'm just
go
saying
ahead.
quickly that I agree, I can't agree more with what Chair Wood just said, that it's really wonderful that we were lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time for you in your career. It was wonderful to hear from you. Gives me lots of hope. And we'll be working on childcare, and I would love to talk more with you about how we do a better job looking through that lens as we move forward with that legislation. I think it would be incredibly helpful. We know families are struggling with wanting their children to be in a place where they feel it's part of their heritage, part of their world that their children will experience. And I think that's hard in a place like Vermont. So I want to be able to do the best we can. But so glad to have you. Really such an interesting background, and thank you very, very much.
Sure, thank you. And I look forward to working on that project and all of our others. Vermont is really unique in a lot of ways. And so I look forward to the ways that, those facets play out and how I can support and be helpful.
Any other comments? I also have to say that, being somewhat familiar with all of the news reports around what was happening in Hartford and, on the select board there, that thank you for surviving that. And thank you for taking that experience and applying it to the context of doing good here for not, I have this sense that you're not going to only have an impact on DCF, but appreciate you willing to be a role model for other departments in the agency, human services and beyond, because I think that is important as well. So not everybody's willing to take on that role. So appreciate that, you've highlighted that as one of the things that you hope to achieve as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Representative Garofano.
Welcome. I want to applaud DCF and AHS for just making such a phenomenal choice. I'm really, really excited you're here. I hope that you will leverage the existing work. I know you talked about that, but I don't know if you know, but I wear two hats. So I look forward to working with you at this hat and the one when I return back to DCF. And really continuing on in the work that's already been accomplished and leveraging the amazing talent and resources that exist within DCF to move this work forward, to embed the equity lens in everything, just like you said. I think it's really important. I'm thrilled to hear that. So thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate being here and
You're welcome in this committee at any time.
Thank you.
Are your colleagues. Janet, I'm not sure if there's, would you like to take the witness chair and share some personal information about yourself? Or, you know, we feel like we're getting to know you and some of us already know you and, but, you know, want to give you the opportunity to give a little background too that maybe you haven't had an opportunity to do.
Yeah, thank you. So again, Janet McLaughlin, Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Children and Families, Child Development Division. Yes, it's been great to be able to connect with you all already. But I think in terms of background for me, I have been working in nonprofits for my entire career, really focused on, right, how do we create this, you know, a society that, you know, does meet the needs of all of our kids and families. So this is my first role in state government. So I am learning to sort of speak state and be part of the team. And I wanted to do this, and I wanted to take on this role though, because I recognize that that given the size and scope of the problems we're trying to take on, that the government needs to, you know, we need government action and we need public action and you know, we need a really high functioning state agencies and state divisions. And so I wanted to be a part of that. You know, I have sort of for the last, you know, saying my son's in the building now with his fifth grade classroom. So it's been 11 years-ish, right, that I've been more connected to early childhood education, obviously with the educators who serve my son. But then as a board member and treasurer at a nonprofit childcare center that he attended, and then working sort of on the programs and strategy side at Let's Grow Kids, and then most recently at the Vermont Association for the Education of Young Children. So I have been learning from early childhood professionals really intensely over the last 7 years, and so I'm hoping I'm bringing that. But also recognize at the Child Development Division, we also have a great team of people who, you know, many of whom have been doing the work for a while, and also a bunch of new folks. And I think that's a great opportunity for us. I wanted to just let you know that we are sort of rebuilding our leadership team within the Child Development Division, and so happy to make connections there as needed. But we have our new Director of Policy and Planning, Chris Case, is coming to us from the Agency of Education, where he was really working on student support services on that within Agency of Education. So he'll be one of our key leadership team members within CDD, which I think will be a great help in terms of that connection. We also have recently hired Dr. Dawn Rouse, and she's has been a professor of early childhood education, most recently at the University of Wisconsin La Crosse, I think. And she is, but she had also worked in the New Hampshire sort of version of CDD before. So again, she's, I think, got a really great background. And again, she's got really strong early childhood education and early childhood systems knowledge to bring to the team. And then our Director of Operations is somebody who has worked in state government for 22 years. So I think she will keep us keep us moving forward. So I just wanted you guys to know that in terms of the leadership team, we're going to be working together to think about, strategically what we need to, how our division works together, as a whole. Just based on your question just earlier, I just did want to flag that within the division, we do have, a number of different programs. And so we do have early intervention services, our children's integrated services, which is really looking at how do we meeting the developmental needs of kids 0 to 3 who are identified as needing some additional services. This is fun. This work is paid for by Medicaid Part C, I believe, dollars. So I'm still learning that piece of it, but just want to mention that because those early intervention services are a really critical part of our early childhood services, and that's part of the work of the division as well. And then we do childcare financial assistance, right, which is helping people afford childcare, both for children before they reach school age and also for after school and summer care. There's childcare licensing, again, in those early learning settings or in after school settings, and then a bunch of initiatives and supports related to the quality and systems So that's just a little bit more in terms of the context for the division, and my hope is that, we're able to really move forward as a really trusted and efficient team, and that the line of communication is open with all of our stakeholders. Obviously that includes you, but also parents and the early childhood professionals, and others that are caring for our youngest children. And then the final thing I just wanted to flag that you guys, I know you do have an appreciation of, but people have talked about the CDDIS, which is the technology side of things. And that really is a huge lift, as in, not the only place in state government where that was under-resourced for many years. And so it really is a huge lift to transition into, into the new day with that system. And so there's lots of changes that we all want to implement. And a lot of them, they have to be implemented in order, and you have to make decisions at the beginning that impact things going forward for these really massive IT projects. And so we're looking forward to partnering with you. And, we also get, wish things could move faster sometimes than they can on the IT side. So looking in terms of working together and thinking about deadlines and things like that, we'll do our best to provide the best information we can and to meet, what's laid out. But recognizing that there are, that's a place where we're going to focus, but there also are things that are just outside of our control there as well. So those are a few things I wanted to tell you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm excited to work with you all.
Thank you. We as well.
Yeah.
She had an opportunity to be questioned ad nauseum from the committee earlier, but are there any other questions or comments that people would like to make to Deputy Commissioner?
I guess I would just say thank you again. It's great to have you on board and to be able to work together in a different way, but it's terrific. And when you talk about IT and sort of what we'll be looking at, one of the things that's coming up is the enrollment versus attendance study. And one of the pieces of that was whether or not we could use our information systems to help inform that. We paid, CCFAP did pay on enrollment during COVID. So we didn't think it was quite as heavy of a lift as it seems to be, but that's something we'll be really interested in understanding as we work on childcare.
Yeah, and we are writing that report right now.
Touches on.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Deputy Commissioner. We appreciate you being here. We appreciate all three of you and your willingness to step into some challenging times. And speaking of challenging times, we're going to transition to housing. So you might want to stick around for that. We're going to spend a little time this morning. Thank you so much.
I'm going to go find my son.
We're going to spend a little time this morning. As you recall, committee, we had a group working on housing. So Representative McGill and Representative Small worked with counterparts downstairs in the House General and Housing Committee. And we have also been working with our counterparts in appropriations, as well as at the agency, in trying to, how do I put this? Trying to, capture not only our ability to try to deal with the situation as we see it now, but also to plan for the future and to envision something different than what we have in the current general assistance program. So I've asked Jubilee and Taylor to review what the subgroup had come up with, to sort of give us an update on what's happening now. And so they are prepared to do that. And we do have a couple of documents on our committee webpage for you to take a look at. And I'll turn it over to the two of you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, as you may remember, before town meeting week, Julie and I went to the old General Housing and Military Affairs committee room, how fitting, and had a slew of guests come in to either testify, help us out, as well as working with our committee members on the House General Committee. And so we were really looking at housing and homelessness as the full continuum, recognizing that we are focused on the benefits end of addressing homelessness, while housing is really focused on building housing and maintaining folks in housing. And so we came together with a proposal that is, I would say, all encompassing. But before I get into the language that we put together, Jubilee, do you have anything that you want to add about the process overall?
You might just want to mention who from House General and Housing was assigned to work with you.
Happy to.
Yeah, we have Representative Chestnut Tinderman, Representative Sadia Lamont, and then Representative Elizabeth Burrows joined us as well as they were people. They were also working on Page Family Medical at the same time, so they were a little busy as well. Yeah, we just tried to look, you said all encompassing. We kind of tried to look at, ways to prevent people entering homelessness, as well as kind of working to get folks out of homelessness. So it wasn't, we weren't adding more folks in as we were working to address the problem.
And what we really heard from the department through testimony is that there seems to be this revolving door when it comes to emergency housing, and it's not the same folks coming in or going out and then coming right back in, but that it's folks are getting into permanent housing, and then there is still this backlog of folks that are losing their housing and now going into the emergency housing program. And so the first part of our work was really how do we maintain folks in housing, and thinking about rent and renters in particular, knowing that following the pandemic, there was a significant increase in no-cause evictions, which don't give opportunity for folks to be able to go through any deliberative process, and just a really hard realization that you are now out on the street with only 3 to 6 months notice. So the first section of it's a very draft bill. It didn't go through editing, so if you find typos, that's exactly why. The first section is thinking about exactly that, of how we are maintaining folks in housing. And so the first is kind of implementing the pieces around security deposits, making sure that it actually takes on kind of the Burlington model when it comes to renters, and making sure that the security deposit is no more than 1 month's rent, and that landlords are not charging more than just a first month's rent and security deposit, instead of what we sometimes hear of first, last, and security, or that a security deposit is significantly more than 1 month's rent, or even adding additional deposits for children or pets or all these other fees that might come up unnecessarily. So we wanted to limit the security deposit to just 1 month's rent, as well as, I think I covered that. In the second section is where we start to talk about the termination of tenancy, and really this is where we're going into the just cause eviction realm. And so as folks know, just cause eviction as an overall kind of heading is really saying that landlords, if they're going to go through an eviction process, have to give a distinct reason for the eviction. Right now, Vermont has no cause evictions in place, which means that landlords actually don't have to have a reason for ending tenancy. It can be as simple as we just didn't have the right fit. We didn't really understand each other well, so I'm sorry, you no longer have housing. Which we see as the opportunity for discrimination in housing, and being able to potentially get away with such a thing by saying, oh, well, you just weren't the right fit. And how do you prove that or not prove that? In looking at also the piece that folks are selling their units, we've heard from many folks who maybe aren't no cause evicted, but they're in a unit that then gets sold to a new owner. And with that new owner coming in, the rents are increased double or triple. And so giving the opportunity for folks in those situations to be able to have the right of first refusal, meaning that if there are multiple units, if the majority of tenants would like to buy the apartment building or complex, or if the tenants are able to collaborate and work with a local nonprofit who would be willing to buy, that they would have the opportunity to do that first before it goes on the market for other sales.
And we did speak with the HCB, and they've experienced doing this, especially with mobile home parks, and so they were ready and willing, and they just need the legislative intent, but to do this, and so we were envisioning, creating funds to help make that possible, like some down payment assistance, and kind of help going through that the legal process, just like they do have been doing with mobile
homes. Yeah,
and that's mostly a co-op program, right? So it's the same, you're gonna set it up the same way. I worked with
We already have the co-op law, the language that oversees the mobile home park that does apply to apartments as well. So this just adds in the right of first refusal that makes it so the landlord does have to give the tenants that option.
And we established the majority to be in line with the co-op language so that it isn't just a simple 50% plus one, but instead is looking at, I believe it was 2/3 of the tenants agreeing to it. Other pieces embedded in there is a maximum increase in rent. Following a similar line, what we are hearing from folks is that their rents are going up astronomically. They're not being no-cause evicted. They just literally cannot pay their rent. So we added in a no greater than 5% increase on rent within a 12-month period. And so just so we're clear, that would be on that year's rent. It means that it can increase by 5% the following year, but it's helping to limit those astronomical jumps and increases for folks. Any questions on this so far?
I think maybe the thing to also point out is that what you are, in those sections, you're proposing amendments to current statute.
Correct. Yes. Thank you.
I just wanted to, it's 5% plus CPI, right? That's what I'm seeing in the language.
That is what you're seeing in the language. Thank you. Yeah.
That was different than what we had. That was like something I had flagged for. It was that or the CPI, whichever is lower. I think we had something else. It got changed in that draft somehow.
And I will note the pieces of this proposal that have made it into current legislation being considered, but I will add at this time that none of the pieces that I've reviewed so far are currently being considered in legislation before the House or Senate. Just a proposal at this point. Still looking in the realm of evictions, knowing that there is this balance with landlords and tenants and wanting to make sure that we are supporting those relationships moving forward, establishing an eviction diversion program. I will note that in S100, there is some funding going in for eviction diversion, specifically in providing rental arrears or making sure that folks are able to pay back rent and get back on solid footing with their landlords. I think we learned earlier this year from Vermont Legal Aid that it is less than $3,000 that a majority of evictions or folks who are unable to pay are facing eviction for. And if they were able to have that amount covered, that they would be back on solid ground. So this eviction diversion program both has funding embedded within it to help with that process, but also comes with a coordinator that is working both with landlords and tenants to see the variety of programs that we have available on the state, at the state level, and being able to connect either the tenant or landlord with those programs. Some that I'll highlight is our Vermont Housing Improvement Program, which helps landlords move their units up to code. We have the rental arrears program as well. And included just standard mediation. If there's conflict between a landlord and tenant, being able to have a more collaborative process to move forward rather than taking away someone's housing. Anything you'd like to add there?
Did you, it sounds like you sort of built upon some of the temporary programs that were put in place during the pandemic era of assistance with housing.
Yes. So similar to the Vermont Emergency Rental Assistance Program, this similarly builds on it, but is really focusing on the programs that we already had in place prior to the pandemic and really elevating them and making sure that landlords and tenants are aware and actually have a point person that they can go to and talk to about the programs, which we've heard in various realms of needing some form of navigator or just a point person to talk to. Section 4 is included in current legislation being considered, the Homelessness Response Systems Analysis Study. This was multifaceted. First and foremost, we recognize that on the federal level, there is the All-In program looking to reduce homelessness by 25% by 2025. And the language included in here specifically aligns with those goals on the federal level. But I will also add that the main piece around pushing this was recognizing that we had an interagency council to address homelessness prior, but that has since been exhausted. And where that council left off is they were just integrating the HMIS data, I'll look to you on this one.
Management Information System.
Homeless Management Information System. And just getting the data in, but had not had a chance to be able to review the data, to set consistent success measurements, to know which programs are actually working and the ones that we want to elevate, and which ones maybe need some tweaking. And so this really pushes for these similar members of the council to be coming together to look where they left off and addressing the HMIS data, to set success measurements, and to hopefully encourage the administration to recreate and reestablish this interagency council to address homelessness.
Which we hear they're already working on.
Yes.
So we're keeping it in until we hear, until that's confirmed.
Right.
Publicly.
Yes, and what I think is really important to highlight about this council is that it is the decision makers. It is the commissioners and secretaries who are at the table asking not only what can their independent departments and agencies do to address homelessness, but to provide suggestions to their counterparts in education, transportation, et cetera, to say that we are all in on this issue and that it is multifaceted. And if we want to have a solution to homelessness in Vermont, which we have heard time and time again from testimony and folks in the field, is that for Vermont, homelessness is a policy choice. We have made that choice. We can address it and have not fully gotten to seeing that realization. Yet we have about 5 outstanding roadmaps or plans to end homelessness. So we are also hoping to update those and get to full implementation. Other pieces I will highlight that are kind of outside the bounds of this committee in particular is municipal and regional planning development. The pieces in here are also included in S100, and so we hope to see them continue to be a part of that bill. One piece being the expansion of emergency shelters. We've heard from communities that they either had the opportunity to buy or were offered housing to be able to provide emergency shelter. And communities were stepping in and blocking that process because it takes simply 10 people to be able to say no. So now we would like to update our municipal codes to clearly define emergency shelters in law, as well as saying that there should be nothing impeding a state-owned or state-run emergency shelters, especially to make sure that they're able to fulfill their determined use. All of that to say we can put money into VHCB around emergency housing and emergency shelter expansion. But if we don't have these municipal codes updated, then we're just going to see that money sit there as we see on the local level that lack of expansion.
So similar to recovery housing?
Very similar, actually. I'm glad you brought that up. And I'm seeing one piece that isn't in the draft here, but is also being considered in the House General Bill that came out, is around crisis standards of housing. This is really hoping to move us away from the adverse weather conditions policy where, outside of the pandemic, it had folks in the field having to go check the weather app to see what the temperature is going to be that night, what the precipitation rate's going to be, matching it against those guidelines, and then being able to say, well, I think you might be able to get housing tonight. Or actually, I don't know, maybe the precipitation percentage isn't high enough that you would be able to get into emergency housing. So to move away from what I assume are going to be even more extreme weather conditions as we face climate change, moving to something that is consistent, that folks both in the field can understand and be able to communicate to the folks that they're working with, and knowing these are the conditions in which emergency housing and hotel motels is necessary and available, and where we have other opportunities for folks to get into shelters or other options.
So just to let folks know sort of where housing is in the sort of process of being addressed. So there was a bill that was voted out of House General last Friday. If you look at the, do you have the number 278 or something like that?
I believe you are correct.
248 or 278? I think it's
I'm pulling it up right here,
Okay.
276.
276. All right, well, I had one of the numbers. I had two of the numbers right. Yeah. So House Bill 276. So there's been a lot of discussions back and forth between Chair Stevens and I, and between Rep. Holcomb and a number of people in appropriations. And so what we have decided to do is to take sections 4 and 5 out of that bill as introduced by House General, and to insert them into the budget with some minor modifications on language. But so the intent is that the stuff that really applies to the general assistance program and not to the rest of that bill deals with registries, rental registries. Okay, so these sections really don't deal with rental registries at all. And so, I'll just be frank, I made a decision that we don't want these to get held up in that debate. And so we want them to continue to move. And so it is, right now we have agreement from House Appropriations to include language on housing, specifically those two sections as modified in the budget bill. So that's where things are moving on housing right now. We've had sort of fits and starts about where some of this stuff will land or not land. The House General Committee is anticipating taking up some of these additional components that Taylor and Jubilee just talked about in another bill later this session, sort of similar to some of the stuff we have. We know we're not finished with substance use response. We're going to be looking at another bill. They are going to be looking at another housing bill as well. And some of the other ideas are require more time to flesh out, like the landlord-tenant issues and the rent issues. And so they will be continuing to work on that. But I do want to extend my thanks both to Taylor and to Jubilee for working through this process. And it's not always easy to do. And this certainly has had its moments. But I just want to publicly appreciate the work that you've done in moving us along. And we are moving, we are moving forward. And I think that is important to note, that we are looking at a place with the department as partners and the community providers to increasing the base in the general assistance program, increasing that on an ongoing basis, which is a huge deal. And that's a huge step forward, because that is, our intent really is to signal to the community that there are going to be resources there for us to reimagine what emergency housing might look like in the future. But in the interim, we still need to support the people who are essentially what we did was to take the language out of the BAA in terms of priority populations and put it into the budget. So it's the same priority populations that we've already seen. And on the flip side of things, I do want to be upfront and say that that is not housing everybody. We are still hearing from housing advocates. We will continue to hear from housing advocates, and we'll do our darndest to try to house as many people as possible. But I need to be honest that that is not going to house everybody. That's where we're at on housing. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the weather kind of system. Taylor brought it up, and is within that section 4 and 5 that's living in the budget now, and do we include kind of like winter coverage? Because I know that's something that we had discussed.
It is still included.
So there's like a date, there's a range of dates in the winter months.
There's no specific dates in the budget bill, but it still does reference adverse weather conditions.
And
yes.
The department will create those dates are to come.
So it won't be, in the middle of winter checking the weather every night. There will be some.
To that.
Not going to go back. Yeah, the department has indicated they are not going back to that. They have, even, I'm not sure everybody understands that it has been broadened from what it was pre-COVID. So there has been a broadening of that. And it's really just on the two ends of that period of time that there's temperature things going on. But the middle part of the winter, that temperature thing check has been
And at that point, everyone will be housed, like you had mentioned, not everyone, at that point, there will
be pretty open.
Those populations.
Yes.
Won't come into play, it'll be a discretion.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? Or,
that's what this is about.
I'm just curious, what's happening with the budget then, or with what we might work on later around supports for housing for the folks who aren't easy to house and need help in order to be in the housing world.
Mm-hmm.
And we know many of our municipalities are struggling with this and need our help. So I'm curious.
Well, our budget recommendation included a one-time $2.5 million increase to the Housing Opportunity Program grants, with the specific language tied to supporting and providing wraparound services for those in the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program.
And that's hung in there.
I can tell you that the department is not in favor of the language. They want it to be broader. We also, people might remember, we also have a recommendation, and honestly, I'm not sure what's happened there down that last night, but we have a recommendation. Our recommendation was for an additional $2 million, I think it was, for the base funding of the housing opportunity grants that was broader for all of the supports and services that the HOP program does. But the 2.5 in one time was specifically to the hotel motel, to assist people in hotel motel. As of, yesterday at 5:00, it was still there. I don't know what has happened in the meantime.
Well, good that it's still there. Thank you for telling me.
Well, it was there. Like I said, there's a qualifier around everything budget right now. But, I want to be clear that the department was not supportive of the language. They wanted more flexibility. And in reality, that was our worksheet. The language that's actually in the budget is actually quite broad. But it's a moving.
I want to be on the record over and over again for anyone out there who's listening that we've just got to figure out this piece. We put all this money into housing and we're not putting enough money into supports. And I know you know that. And I know many, many people do, but I don't understand where the administration's coming from on this issue. And it's one very big thing to me.
And I did also, just so you know, in my testimony for the committee, I did also mention first responders. And, I don't know it was out of our area of responsibility in the budget. But I did, make a pitch for it, even if they had some one-time money to give to, emergency responders. That would be recognition of the work that they have stepped up to.
Outside of this, but inclusive, I do just really want to underscore my appreciation of Jubilee in this work, not only as a first-year legislator coming in hot and addressing such a big issue, but your experience in the field was invaluable in this entire process and being able to really make sure that we're doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
So, thank you.
Yeah. It is what it's all about, being a citizen legislator. We all bring experiences, and hopefully we get in places where we can use those experiences. So a prime example. So thank you.
Very happy to wind up in
Many examples
in this committee. We do. I know.
For Jubilee in particular.
Dan, did you have something? You look like you were sort of raising your hand.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to step out, and you may have spoken about this while I was outside. I often hear that there's individuals who are experiencing homeless that are on Choices for Care and in need of home health services, and wondering if that came into your discussions about older Vermonters in the hotels or.
It definitely did come into the discussions and was continued in our recommendation for the BA language to include older Vermonters in that definition. But
and that's around those something, it's got a word before it, but care teams, coordinated care teams. And I know that different departments within AHS, have assigned people to the coordinated care team to specifically address those populations that it's frustrating because they have resources for supports but they don't have the housing. And that's I went to before the session to my local home health agency here, and they talked about the supports that they're providing in the motel program for people who have really compromised health conditions and really should not be in a hotel, living in a hotel, and yet also trying to. This is where how our things. Hopefully, you start to see the interconnectedness. So, raising Medicaid rates in our residential care homes and for assistive community care services will enable people who qualify for Medicaid to have more access to those services, which they don't have now. So people may qualify for those supports, but those folks are also running businesses and they can only afford to take so many Medicaid recipients because we're not paying anywhere as close to what it costs to provide that care. So that's a bump up, which is still in, I know that one for a fact, is still on the yes list downstairs. So that will help.
And definitely number of employees is directly related to the number of individuals that can be housed in those settings for residential care facilities and nursing homes for that matter.
Right.
It's directly related to their employees, number of employees.
One of the first things, Taylor, just kind of talking about the interconnectedness, one of the first things Taylor and I did is we reached out to all of the departments, thinking very broadly, like what is your capacity, what was your capacity pre-COVID, where are you at now? And just thinking that, some of the people who are in homelessness right now are, because they belong in other programs or because of capacity issues elsewhere. And unfortunately, a lot of the data we needed wasn't being tracked. So I'm hopeful that can be, kind of added and looking, systemically, and as they build this new council, really, making sure we're inventorying and looking at all of the kind of the beds or units or rooms, whatever language, and really seeing where people are flowing and where they should be, and making sure we're taking a comprehensive approach.
Just as Julie was speaking about the chair, there's a tremendous gap in data in almost every sector of everything in the world right now. The numbers that we're using are 2018 and 2019 numbers, and so much has changed. And it's so hard to forecast what we really need. Like I always look at these numbers. I'm like, can that be right? Shouldn't that be like 30-40% more when you think about the inflation and just the numbers of the need and everything.
Yeah, and state government is notoriously horrible at allocating resources, and that's partly our responsibility for IT. And, recognizing that there's a huge need across state government. And at the same time, the Agency of Digital Services only has the capacity to manage so many projects at the same time. And so we have to, there's all of that balancing act.
Even taking national numbers is.
Oh, yeah. No, I know you were referring to national as well. Yeah. Yeah. So I just want to say again, thank you to the two of you for spearheading this, and continue to watch it, folks. It'll be an evolutionary process. It will change again in the Senate. It will change before Friday's vote out of Appropriations Committee. I feel confident of that because it's continues to be a moving target. But thank you all. So we will not be meeting after the floor since we did this before the floor. And the floor, I think, is likely to last some time. So make sure you have fluids. You can have water on the floor, don't forget. And we have plenty of snacks. And if those ones don't suit your fancy, we just there was stacking up. And so there are more up there. And thank you to the folks who brought in snacks this week, that recognizing we were going to be here for a while over the next couple of days. And there's more cake for dessert. All righty. Thank you.